Good. All right. Afternoon, everybody. Coming off the bye week, just a chance for our guys to kind of regroup. We started off with a tough couple of games to start the season, and we were so glad to get a victory last weekend, the weekend before against Villanova, and just anxious to play again. We still are nursing the injury bug a little bit, but as this week's gone along, we've gotten a little healthier and seen more guys come out to the practice field. We've modified our practices a little bit, just when we're in pads, when we're in shells, when we're in shorts, to kind of help our team get healthy. Hopefully it'll work, and we'll have a bunch of these guys back for Saturday. We're going to need it. We're playing a very athletic football team, and one we've got tremendous respect for. We've obviously played them the last couple of years, 19 and 21, and both times down there, and they've just got a well-coached, very talented football team, and we don't get distracted by any of the other stuff that people might put into comparing teams. They've played South Carolina, North Carolina, Coastal Carolina, and Charlotte, all of whom are good football teams, and we obviously have a comparable against Coastal Carolina, who we know is a great football team. That's a team that they beat last year. So the perhaps one of the top teams, if not the top team in the Sun Belt Conference, they beat them last year at the end of the season when teams are playing their best football. So Sean's done just a terrific job with that program. They've got 9 starters on defense that played against us a year ago, as well as some backups. So they're going to be very familiar with what we do. The defensive coordinator worked with Nate Woody, our defensive coordinator, so very familiar with our offense. And so plenty of challenges, and glad to be at home, and hopefully we'll have a great crowd to help us out there on Saturday.
Hey, Coach Rich DeMarco, Army Radio. The victory against Villanova going into the bye and coming out of the bye, aside from it being a W in the win column, what does it do for the confidence of a team heading into this extended amount of practice that y'all have had?
We just were so desperate for a win, to have that feeling in the locker room and to celebrate a victory. And Villanova's a good football team. And just look again, Southern Illinois beat Northwestern a week ago, and Sacramento State beat Colorado State this past weekend. And those FCS teams, especially now with the transfer portal and the parity that is existent now in college football, those are tough games to win. So I was proud of our team for the victory, and it felt great. There's still a lot of work to be done. We recognize a lot of things in that ball game that we got to do better, and so hopefully we'll do those better against Georgia State.
So 3 games into the season, you have the bye, so the quarter pole, I guess you would say. How do you feel about this team 25% of the way through the year?
Just a work in progress that we've got to improve. We've got to do a much better job on defense of shedding blocks and getting ball carriers to the ground and not missing tackles. We're still we did better against Villanova, but still can do a lot better with that part of the game. Offensively, we look better on Saturday, or the Saturday before against Villanova than we had the two previous Saturdays. But still, just not where we want to be collectively, and hitting on all cylinders as an offense. And that's individual performances all over the field, all 11 guys doing their job and doing it together. And I hope that this week, the last couple of weeks, will help us get in better sync and play together. We can't miss assignments. We've missed assignments, blocked the wrong guy, or things that we can control. Played poorly fundamentally at times. That if we'll do that better, that's going to help us. So there's a lot of things we can improve on, and that's kind of where I see us after 25% of the season, is still a work in progress, not playing the best football that I think we're capable of. So hopefully here this Saturday we'll get closer to that.
Thanks, Coach.
Okay, Charles, you can start.
Good afternoon, Coach. Charles Grievous here with GoBlackKnights.com. As you mentioned, you're coming off a bye week, which obviously allowed for some of the walking wounded, I guess, to have a week of a recovery, if you will. Fullback Jacoby Buchanan was one of the starters who went down against Villanova. Can you bring us up to date with his status and the status of some of the other starters in terms of recovery?
Just trying to nurse them back to health. Obviously, having 2 weeks for a guy like Jacoby and some of the other guys that went down. We've had a couple guys get hurt in practice during this bye week, this 2 week stretch. So last week we had a couple of guys that got injured, so we got to get them back. And I prefer not to divulge too much information, but I think those guys are getting closer. And obviously Jacoby's a big part of our offense, and if we can get him out there and have him playing, it's going to be a positive for us. So we'll see. I think our training staff's doing a really good job, and I think he's feeling a lot more comfortable than he was last week. So we still got a lot of time between now and Saturday. Hopefully we'll get him healthy and some of those other guys as well.
Great. And often special teams are overlooked unless, of course, there's an important missed kick or a fumble on a kickoff or a punt return. Against Villanova, Terrell's 73-yarder was very impressive, but also impressive with some of the key blocks with Isaiah Austin and others. Can you talk about this year's special teams and the impact that they've had thus far?
I think special teams is an extremely important part of the game, and we don't give it lip service. We spend a lot of time on special teams. We do individual drills for all the special teams phases, just like we do for offensive defense. We feel like practicing the skills and honing those skills so that they come out and show up in the games is really important. And I think that's what's happened. Last year, I thought our special teams performed really well. I think our special teams units are doing a really good job this year. We're covering punts really well. We're covering kickoffs really well. We had the one, might have been against UTSA, kind of popped out to our right side on a kickoff return. We missed a tackle, but beyond that, we've done a good job of when people have returned it, of getting them to the ground inside the 25. The punt return was huge, and Tyrell made a great run. He made the first guy miss, found a seam, and then we got some guys out in front of him. And a year ago we had a similar setup for a punt return, and we didn't return it for a touchdown. We had blockers out in front, kind of passing guys up, and we worked really hard at setting those walls and getting ourselves in position to make those blocks so that we could spring the punt returner. And we got a really fast guy, a really dynamic guy carrying the ball, and a guy like Bo Nicholas Paul and Fabrice Voyne, some guys throwing some blocks along the way, really were key to him getting into the end zone.
My follow-up and final question, again, a little bit away from Army football per se. There are many factors that go into decisions by college administrators when it comes to pulling the plug on head coaches. And although we're at the early part of the 2022 season, several coaches have been fired. Whomever was at Arizona State, Georgia Tech's Jeff Collins. I'm not asking you to speak specifically about coaches or schools, but can you give your assessment on what I call, what have you done for me lately, culture in college football, and when those schools fire head coaches, one issue that seems to be overlooked, that they're also firing several other people as well.
That seems to be happening more often, a lot earlier in the season than it had. But I think it comes with the paycheck. Coaches' salaries have risen in college football, much like the NFL coaches' salaries have risen. And you look at guys making $9, $10, $11 million a year in college football. That was unheard of 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, I was reading, I think you're talking about Steve Spurrier. He maybe made $1 million when he was maybe when he was coaching Florida. They won the national championship. I think he was one of the few guys making 7 figures. I don't know if I read that correctly, but when schools are paying coaches that much money, the expectation is to win and to win right now and to continue to win. And if that's not happening, they're going to make a change. But just it comes with the territory and the expectations of what they're paying coaches. And so it is unfortunate that people are losing their jobs, and I hate to see anybody lose their job. Doesn't matter if it's a college football coach or anybody else. I hate to see somebody losing their job. But this is, we're in this profession with the understanding that we have a job to do. It's, for us here, it's to educate, train, and inspire these young men to be Army leaders and to win football games and do it with integrity and honor the brand that we represent. And that's the case for every coach at every school. They represent the brand of the university that they represent, and there's an expectation that it's done with excellence. And so when it's not going well, there's changes that are made sometimes. It's unfortunate, but it's part of the business.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ken Kreitzer.
Hey, good afternoon, Coach. Good to see you. I just want to go back to what Charles asked about on the VBAC situation. You gave an update on Jacoby Buchanan. With Tyson Riley had a super game, obviously, against Villanova, but he was coming off an injury. Who are some of the other players you might see stepping up in that position at fullback or VBAC?
Hayden Reed had a nice run in the game, for a touchdown. He's a freshman, played at our prep school last year, so he's not completely inexperienced. But we've been really pleased with him and the job that he's done. I think behind him, there's really a lot of unknowns. Jarrell Dixon, A.J. Williams, Lucky Brooks, Markel Johnson, Bo Kite. There's a lot of guys that are kind of in one big lump there behind Hayden Reed. And that's going to shake out. It'll shake out as we go through practice and those guys get a chance to play some of the games, and we'll see what happens there. But there's plenty of bodies. It's just really getting one of those guys to maybe come out of that pack and define himself as the next guy behind Hayden Reed. But with Riley, Buchanan, Reed, those are 3 really good players right now. I mean, for us. In our offense. Tyson had a great game. Jacoby's, he's had enough really good runs and really good football games in big games for us, and Hayden Reed, and just his his development just through the preseason camp and the first 3 games is really promising. So I think there's some guys there that can help us. We just haven't really been able to sort it out and figure out which ones at the top of that pack and which one's next. But hopefully we won't get our hand forced and have to make that decision because it's an end game, when everybody's out and we got to put the next guy in. I hope we'll be able to work that through practice and in some situational football in games that we'll be able to figure out who the 4th and the 5th and so on is at B-back.
Just taking a look at Georgia State, as you said, you've seen them twice in recent years and defeated them on opening day last year. They came back with a strong second half of their season, winning their bowl game over Ball State. And same quarterback played much of last year, Darren Granger, got a strong throwing arm. What do you see as different in this team or similar to the team you played last year?
I think they're very similar. As I said, they got a bunch of guys that have played against us. They got a running back that set the single season or career record, maybe the career rushing record. They've got a couple of record-setting receivers that are playing for them. I mean, they've got excellent skill, and that school in that state in that location. There is a tremendous recruiting pool for them, and they don't have to drive an hour from their campus to get some really, really good players. And they got a lot of local kids, a lot of Atlanta kids on their team that are really good players, guys that we evaluated in recruiting and many of whom we recruited that we got a lot of respect for. So we got a lot of Georgia kids on our team, and there's a reason. There's a lot of really good players in that state. So I think they got a very talented football team. As I said, I think those guys are athletic and fast, and they're physical. I mean, we've played them twice. I know exactly who they are, and just have tremendous respect for their kids, their players, and their coaches. And it's going to take a great, great effort on our part to be able to win the football game on Saturday.
Just a quick question to finish up. Looking at their stats on the defense, they're holding opponents to 158 yards a game rushing. They played some big-time teams. What do you see in their rush defense on Georgia State?
Really, really good up front. Their defensive line is outstanding. Really stout. Not a big, tall, bunch of 6'5" guys. They got guys that are just really good athletes. What they look like are guys that are maybe big outside linebackers that have grown into being defensive linemen, and they've remained athletic and quick, and that makes them really difficult to block and puts a lot of pressure on defenses or on offenses. Excuse me. They got an outside linebacker who is one of the best football players I've seen of any of the opponents we played this year. Really good player, and so I've got a sheet here with their roster, and they're too deep. And I mean, I just go down the list. There's 9 starters that played against us a year ago, and there's some guys that are listed as backups that had tackles against us and played against us last year. So they're a really good football team, really good defense, and to be able to say that you're holding people to under 160 yards when you've played North Carolina and South Carolina and Coastal Carolina, who's got one of the best rushing offenses in the country, and Charlotte, who Will Healy and the job he's doing at Charlotte and the way that they run the ball in RPOs, and I mean that's impressive. But Nate Pine, the defensive coordinator, is a really good football coach, and he does a tremendous job putting those guys in position, and they make plays, and so this is a good football team who they played tough in every single football game. Like I said, I know who they are, and I know who we are, and it's going to take a great effort on our part to move the ball against this defense and to be able to stop them on offense.
McMillan?
Hi, Jeff. Ken McMillan from The Record. Running backs. Is there any concern on your part about the depth of the running back position right now? And what will it take for those names you mentioned to finally get a shot? How close are they?
Well, they're not close if Tyson Riley and Jacoby Buchanan are healthy. I mean, if those guys are playing, we're going to play with them. Those are the 2 top running backs, and Hayden Reed has really done a good job. When he's come in, he's the 3rd guy. So unless those top 2 guys are hurt and can't play, I mean, it's just the way it is. You're not going to play 4, 5, 6 guys down the list with guys that are inexperienced. Now, we've had seasons here where we've played 4 or 5 guys at B-back, but they were different guys with more experience, guys that had played on special teams, and that crowd, Woolfolk and Andy Davidson and Kalen Holt and McCoy, and I mean that was a pretty strong bunch of guys. Who else am I leaving out? I know there's one more guy in there, Slomka. Yep. So I mean that's 5 guys that rolled in there and played quite a bit of football, and then last year with Adkins and Bernard, and I mean there was a stable of guys that we could play. That's we've got Riley and Buchanan who have all the experience. We got Hayden Reed who's really performed well, and the rest of those guys are essentially inexperienced and have been hurt, and we're trying to bring them along. So we'll see what happens as the season goes along.
Speaking of competition, your defense. You've had guys who are holding their spots, but is there some competition for some playing?
Inside linebacker is a good example. We've had a game. We've rolled a ton of defensive linemen. I think the most snaps one of our defensive linemen played last week was 28, and so those reps were spread out, and so I think that's positive. Seeing other guys getting a chance to play, and we haven't been rotating as many guys in the secondary. Marquell's played quite a bit, and Jabari Moore's played quite a bit, and that's that's going to be the case at probably at positions like that. But there's plenty of guys that are practicing well, and we're trying to bring along. I mean, even as we're going through the season, a guy like Kamari Copeland and Jacob Tuioti, who we've mentioned in the past and talked about. Those are both freshmen. We got some young guys in the program that I think are going to be really good players. It's just when you're a freshman, it's hard to beat out the experience of a guy that's a junior or senior. So we'll continue to bring those guys along, and perhaps as the season goes along and we get into the later games, as those guys have had a chance to be in situations, play on special teams, that they'll be more comfortable in there, and we'll be more comfortable putting them in there.
Speaking of depth, we saw Bryson Daley briefly the other day. Obviously, he had his big gainer, called back by penalty, though. But your thoughts on Bryson's development, and what's the likelihood we're going to see a bit of him more this year?
Well, like I said, it's hard to beat out experience. And I think as long as those guys at the top of the depth chart at quarterback are healthy, you probably won't see much of Bryson. But he's a really good player, and he's going to be an outstanding quarterback for us. The top three guys on the depth chart are all seniors. So a year from now, we're going to be talking about Bryson Daley and him leading this football team and being our quarterback. So we're going to find a way for him to contribute. He's a physical kid, a tough runner. And so, I mean, he may be a guy that we use in other places on the field this year, be it special teams or running back or something like that. But, I mean, he knows where he is right now, and that hasn't deterred him from continuing to improve and get better at the fundamentals, which he has. And he is going to be a tremendous football player for us. And I'm really excited about the next couple of years with Bryson as our quarterback.
If I can get one more, I'm asking about the kickers. Obviously, Quinn's taking the field goals, PATs, and Cole's taking the kickoffs. What was your decision behind that? Any chance that they, might swap roles or add roles?
Sure. I mean, it's all based on performance, how they performed in practice leading up to the first game, and how they performed in the games. And I think it's working well. They're both doing a really good job with their defined roles right now, and it may be one of them handles both, and it may be that they end up changing jobs. I don't know. We'll see what happens as the season goes along.
Thanks, everybody. That's it.
Have a great day, everybody.